The morning of March 16, 2012, began like any other in Morgan Hill, California, a quiet town tucked between farmland and the rolling foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. The sky was still pale, streaked with soft light as the sun began to lift the mist that clung to the edges of the valley. Birds cut through the silence. Sprinklers hissed in manicured yards. It was the kind of morning that promised nothing out of the ordinary. Inside a single-story beige house on Paquita España Court, Sierra LaMar, a bright and spirited 15-year-old, was getting ready for school. Her room reflected her personality, a swirl of posters, makeup, and soccer medals. Music hummed softly from her laptop as she brushed her long dark hair and checked her phone, texting friends about weekend plans and what to wear that day. Sierra had been in Morgan Hill only a few months, living with her mother, Marlene LaMar, and stepfather Steve after moving from Fremont. Despite the adjustment, she was adapting, lively, outgoing, and effortlessly social. Her friends described her as confident, funny, the kind of girl who lit up a room. That Friday morning, she planned to wear her new juicy couture sweatshirt, skinny jeans, and pink boots, a typical teenage outfit for a typical day. Her mother left early for work, just as she always did, giving Sierra a quick goodbye before heading out the door. Sierra's school bus would arrive a little after 7. The plan was simple: walk the short distance to the bus stop at the corner, ride to and Sobrato High School, and text her mom once she arrived. But that text never came. By mid-morning, her classmates noticed Sierra hadn't shown up to first period. At first, it wasn't alarming. Teenagers oversleep or skip classes all the time. But as the hours passed, teachers noticed the absence. Her friends tried texting and calling. Every message went unread. Every call went straight to voicemail. Her social media accounts, normally active and playful, went silent. By afternoon, Marlene received a call from the school. Sierra hadn't been there all day. For a moment, she thought maybe Sierra had gone to a friend's house, or missed the bus and found another ride. But as she dialed her daughter's phone and heard it ring endlessly, unease began to settle into her chest, a mother's intuition whispering that something was wrong. When she got home, the unease turned to dread. Sierra's bed was made. Her purse was gone. But the items she always carried, her MacBook, her toothbrush, even her makeup bag, were still in place. The morning seemed frozen in time, as if Sierra had stepped out expecting to return within hours. Marlene retraced the usual route to the bus stop. The streets were quiet, the suburban calm unsettling in its stillness. There was no sign of her daughter, no dropped phone, no backpack, no witnesses who had seen her walking that morning. By evening, panic overtook hesitation. Marlene dialed 911, her voice trembling as she reported her daughter missing. It was around 6 p.m. when deputies from the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office arrived, taking down details: what she was wearing, what time she left, who she might have spoken to last. Marlene repeated the story over and over, the same routine morning, the same silence that followed. As night fell, search efforts began modestly. A patrol through nearby roads, a check with local hospitals, a few calls to friends and relatives. Nothing. Sierra seemed to have vanished somewhere between her front door and the bus stop, a stretch of barely 2 city blocks. The next morning, as word spread, volunteers and deputies gathered at the LaMar home. Neighbors printed flyers, stapling Sierra's smiling face to lampposts and store windows. The photo, a cheerful, confident teen with dark eyes and long hair, would soon flood every corner of Morgan Hill and beyond. The neighborhood's peaceful aura transformed overnight. Helicopters hovered overhead. Dogs combed through fields. Reporters arrived, their cameras lingering on the empty road where Sierra was last seen. Inside the LaMar home, Marlene sat by the phone, clutching it in both hands, waiting for a call that never came. Her daughter's friends filled the living room, crying softly, playing voice messages from Sierra's phone just to hear her voice again. Detectives worked quickly, piecing together her digital footprint. Phone records showed her last known activity at 7:11 a.m., a text to a friend, then nothing. The signal dropped abruptly, somewhere near Laguna Avenue, less than a mile from home. It wasn't enough to pinpoint her location, but it was the first thread in a mystery that would soon darken beyond comprehension. By Sunday, hope and fear intertwined. Hundreds of community members joined the search, scouring backroads, ditches, and wooded areas. The sheriff's office treated the case as a suspicious disappearance. There were no signs of a runaway, no arguments, no reason for Sierra to vanish willingly. Every hour that passed deepened the void. In the midst of the search, Marlene stood before cameras, her voice breaking as she pleaded for her daughter's return. "Sierra," she said, "we love you. We're looking for you. Please, just come home." Her words echoed across news broadcasts, carried into homes across California. But the fields stayed silent. The roads remained empty, and the morning Sierra left home, bright, ordinary, unremarkable, became a moment frozen in time, marking the last anyone ever saw of her alive. You're watching Trace of Evil, where we reveal true crimes, unsolved disappearances, and mysteries surrounding crime. Like and subscribe to watch more episodes from our channel. Let's get back into the story of Sierra LaMar. By the third day, Morgan Hill no longer felt like a small, peaceful town. Patrol cars idled on quiet corners, their lights reflecting off mailboxes. Volunteers in neon vests formed lines across open fields, calling Sierra's name into the wind. Each passing hour chipped away at the fragile hope that she would simply walk through the door. The Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office expanded its search radius. They brought in helicopters, ATVs, and specially trained K-9 units. Deputies moved methodically through grasslands and orchards, checking drainage ditches, abandoned sheds, and creek beds. Still, there was nothing. No footprints, no dropped belongings, not a trace of movement from the girl who disappeared in daylight. Then, on March 17th, a small but crucial break surfaced. A volunteer discovered a cell phone lying in the grass near Laguna Avenue, not far from the route Sierra would have taken to the bus stop. The device was muddy, its screen cracked, but recognizable by the bright pink case. When investigators confirmed it was hers, the discovery shifted the tone of the search entirely. Phones get lost. Phones get dropped. But in the context of a missing 15-year-old girl, this wasn't an accident. It was a message, deliberate or desperate, left behind in silence. Forensic teams examined the phone immediately. The last recorded activity was at 7:11 a.m., matching what detectives had already traced. There were no outgoing calls, no GPS movements afterward. It was as if the phone had gone dead all at once, its signal cut short. Detectives revisited the area where it was found. The location was rural, a stretch of open land bordered by farmhouses, barbed wire fences, and an isolated road that saw little traffic at that hour. Whoever took Sierra, if someone had, knew the area well enough to disappear without being seen. A few days later, a second discovery deepened the mystery. About 2 miles away, searchers found a black juicy couture bag lying near a small shed along Santa Teresa Boulevard. Inside were clothes, the same ones Sierra had planned to wear that morning, folded neatly, almost carefully, as if placed there rather than discarded. No blood, no tears, no signs of struggle. The meticulousness disturbed investigators. It didn't fit a random abduction. It suggested calculation, someone who wanted to remove evidence or send a message. The sheriff's office called in forensic analysts. Every item in the bag was sealed, photographed, and sent to the lab. They collected hair strands, fibers, and potential DNA from the inner seams. It would take weeks before results came back, but to detectives, the bag confirmed one thing. Sierra hadn't run away. Something had happened to her between her home and that isolated road. As the search intensified, the community responded in force. More than 700 volunteers joined the daily search efforts. Local businesses donated food and supplies. Entire families showed up to walk fields and creek beds. The Kloss Kids Foundation, founded after the infamous 1993 kidnapping of Polly Kloss, arrived to assist in coordination. Posters bearing Sierra's smiling face blanketed bus stops, stores, and freeway exits. The words, "Missing Sierra LaMar," were printed in bold black across her photograph. Every detail, her height, her hair color, her outfit became part of the public consciousness. Still, the days stretched into weeks. Leads poured in, but none panned out. Tips about a girl matching her description walking along highways, sightings at gas stations, all false. Every one led to a dead end. Detectives began reconstructing her digital life. They searched her text messages, her social media interactions, her browsing history. There were no signs of secret plans, no online predators, no talk of running away. Her last conversations were ordinary school gossip, outfit choices, weekend plans. The absence of motive was chilling. People don't just vanish in daylight for no reason. In a press briefing, Sheriff Lori Smith spoke carefully. "At this time, we're treating this as a suspicious disappearance," she said. "We believe foul play may be involved." Those words echoed through news cycles. Foul play. It was the first public acknowledgement that this wasn't a simple missing person case anymore. Behind the scenes, detectives began cross-referencing known offenders in the area. Anyone with a history of violence, abduction, or sexual assault. They looked at parole records, probation lists, and unsolved assault cases. Dozens were questioned, some even tested for DNA comparisons. Forensic analysis of the bag yielded a faint but promising trace. Male DNA. It didn't match anyone in Sierra's family or known contacts. That discovery shifted the investigation sharply. The DNA was entered into CODIS, the national database used by law enforcement. Results would take time, but the potential of a match gave investigators their first true lead. Meanwhile, search efforts pressed on. In aerial footage, the once green farmlands were now dotted with volunteers wearing bright vests, sweeping across the terrain like a moving grid. They scoured creeks, dug through fields, even drained parts of reservoirs. As the search stretched past the 2-week mark, public hope began to crack under the weight of reality. Candlelight vigils were held in the evenings. Teens from Sierra's high school spoke of her warmth, her energy, her humor. Parents hugged their children tighter, realizing how fragile normal mornings really were. Marlene LaMar became the face of a mother's endurance. She spoke to the media daily, eyes swollen from sleepless nights. "We just want her home," she said softly. "If anyone knows anything, please say something." Detectives continued tracing that single, invisible thread, the male DNA found on her belongings. It wasn't much, but in a case built entirely on absence, it was everything. And somewhere, beyond the boundaries of the search grid, the person responsible for Sierra's disappearance was still out there, watching the search unfold, as an entire community unknowingly walked through the fields where she may have taken her last breath. The DNA results arrived quietly, a faint code on a lab report that would soon shift the entire direction of the investigation. The sample collected from Sierra LaMar's clothing was male, consistent across several items. It wasn't a casual transfer or contamination. It was contact DNA, evidence of direct physical interaction. When entered into the National CODIS database, the system lit up with a match. Antolin Garcia-Torres, a 21-year-old resident of Morgan Hill. For detectives who had spent weeks chasing leads that went nowhere, the name carried weight. Garcia-Torres wasn't a stranger to law enforcement. Years earlier, he had been linked to a series of attempted kidnappings involving women in the same area. Women who had narrowly escaped abduction near supermarket parking lots. It was a chilling connection. The geography matched, the method matched, the age difference matched. Investigators began to watch him quietly. Garcia-Torres lived in an RV parked behind his mother's home, just a few miles from where Sierra vanished. He worked at a Safeway grocery store in Morgan Hill, ordinary, forgettable. To neighbors, he was quiet, distant, and mostly kept to himself. But under the surface, detectives began to uncover a darker pattern. Surveillance teams followed him for days, observing his routine, his drives, his routes, his stops. He drove a red Volkswagen Jetta, a small, unassuming car that soon became the centerpiece of the case. When detectives reviewed traffic and surveillance footage from the morning of Sierra's disappearance, a red Jetta appeared in several clips near the Laguna Avenue area, close to where her phone had been found. The timing lined up precisely with her last digital signal, just after 7 a.m. The car moved slowly, deliberately, circling rural intersections. Then, minutes later, it vanished from view. That was enough for investigators to act. They obtained a warrant to seize the vehicle. Under forensic examination, the Jetta told its own silent story. Technicians combed every surface, every fiber. Inside the trunk, beneath the lining, they found faint DNA traces matching Sierra LaMar. The discovery wasn't visible to the naked eye. It required chemical enhancement, but it was there, undeniable. The probability of error was microscopic. Statistically, it was her. Detectives confronted Garcia-Torres. The interview was calm, deliberate. He denied knowing Sierra, denied ever seeing her, denied having any involvement. He claimed he didn't even recognize her face when shown her photo. But the evidence began to corner him. When investigators mentioned DNA, his expression shifted, not shock but calculation. He claimed the DNA might have been transferred by accident, through some unknown way. He couldn't explain how traces of a missing teenage girl's DNA ended up inside his car, or why his vehicle was seen near her route that morning. The more he spoke, the deeper the contradictions ran. Detectives dug into his past. Years earlier, in 2009, 3 women had reported attempted kidnappings in Morgan Hill and nearby areas. Each case followed a similar pattern. A man attacking women in parking lots late at night, using a weapon or physical force, but fleeing before completion. None of the women knew him. All described him as stocky, with short hair and a tense, deliberate manner. Fingerprints from those scenes matched Garcia-Torres, but the cases had never gone to trial. Until now, those attacks had been largely forgotten. When detectives re-examined those files, they saw what had been missed, a progression of behavior. What began as failed abductions had escalated, culminating, perhaps, in Sierra's disappearance. They built their timeline meticulously. Sierra leaves home at 7 a.m. The red Jetta is seen near her route minutes later. Her phone stops transmitting at 7:11. By 7:30, Garcia-Torres' cell phone pings near the same area. By 8 a.m., he's back in Morgan Hill. No witnesses, no body, just data and DNA, invisible but undeniable. Detectives brought him in again, this time for an official interrogation. The tone was sharper now. "Your DNA is on her clothes," one investigator said. "That's impossible," he replied. "I've never met her." "Then explain how it got there." He couldn't. His answers shifted from denial to confusion, from confusion to silence. Outside, the search for Sierra still continued. Volunteers combed reservoirs, creeks, and rural fields. Hope flickered, but the investigative tone had darkened. Law enforcement now believed Sierra had been abducted and murdered, though they hadn't said it publicly yet. Behind the scenes, prosecutors began preparing charges. But before moving forward, they wanted to be sure. They needed one more piece, something that tied Garcia-Torres to Sierra beyond coincidence and science. Detectives analyzed his digital records, his phone history, his browser searches, his social media activity. He had searched for stories about the case multiple times. He'd driven routes overlapping the search zones. They also found faint signs of blood inside his car, not enough to test definitively, but enough to suggest something violent had occurred. When news finally broke that a suspect had been identified, the community's collective breath caught. A face now accompanied the horror that had loomed for months. At the sheriff's press conference, officials revealed his name and photo. Antolin Garcia-Torres, age 21, arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. As his image appeared on television screens, residents of Morgan Hill stared in disbelief. The man looked ordinary, even forgettable. But behind those eyes, investigators believed, lay the truth about what happened to Sierra LaMar. In the days that followed, detectives searched his home and the fields surrounding it. They found small personal items, minor clues, but no sign of Sierra. Her mother, Marlene, watched the news quietly, holding her daughter's framed photo. For her, the arrest wasn't closure, just confirmation of the fear she'd carried since that first night. The man in the shadows finally had a name, but the girl he had taken was still gone, leaving only fragments. A phone, a bag, and the silence of a car that had carried her into oblivion. By the time Antolin Garcia-Torres stood trial, 5 long years had passed since Sierra LaMar vanished. 5 years of unanswered questions, endless searches, and a mother's quiet refusal to give up. For the community of Morgan Hill, the case had become more than an investigation. It was a wound that never closed. Every vigil, every anniversary reminded them of a teenager who should have grown older, graduated, lived. Instead, her name was spoken in past tense, her face forever frozen in the brightness of youth. The trial began in early 2017 inside the Santa Clara County Superior Court. Reporters crowded the hallways, cameras fixed on the man accused of abducting and murdering a 15-year-old girl whose body had never been found. Garcia-Torres entered the courtroom shackled but expressionless. He avoided eye contact with the gallery, even as members of Sierra's family sat only feet away. The air was heavy with years of waiting, 5 years of silence about what truly happened that morning in 2012. The prosecution opened with a statement that was both clinical and devastating. They told jurors this was a no-body homicide, a rare and difficult case where science had to speak in place of a corpse. There were no bones, no confession, no crime scene. Only DNA, data, and pattern threads woven into a single, inescapable story. Prosecutor David Boyd laid it out piece by piece. Sierra's DNA was found inside Garcia-Torres' car. His red Volkswagen Jetta was spotted near her bus route. His history of attempted kidnappings of women in the same area, women who fought him off and lived to tell their story. And then, the silence that began the morning she disappeared. Boyd's tone was measured, but each detail struck like a hammer. The evidence, he said, pointed to one conclusion: that Garcia-Torres had abducted Sierra, killed her, and concealed her remains so effectively that even a decade of searching could not uncover them. The defense countered with what little they had, the absence of a body. Without it, they argued, there could be no proof of death, only speculation. They claimed the DNA could have been transferred accidentally, that investigators had tunnel vision once they identified a suspect. They reminded the jury that Sierra had once mentioned wanting to live elsewhere, to move in with her father, to start fresh. Maybe, they suggested, she'd run away. Maybe she was still alive somewhere, choosing silence. But the evidence refused to bend to that hope. Detectives took the stand, describing in careful detail the months of surveillance, the forensics that matched Sierra's DNA to fibers inside Garcia-Torres' trunk. One expert explained how the sample was consistent with a violent encounter, not casual contact. Another mapped the timeline of Garcia-Torres' movements, a near-perfect overlap with the window in which Sierra vanished. Then came the testimonies from his past victims. Women who described being attacked in parking lots late at night, pulled toward a vehicle that matched the same red Jetta. Each woman's voice trembled as she relived it, their stories forming a chilling pattern of escalation. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of their voices, and the faint clicking of pens as reporters captured every word. Through it all, Marlene Lamar sat in the front row, sometimes holding Sierra's purple scarf, other times closing her eyes as evidence was shown. Each photograph, each forensic slide, felt like reopening an old wound. She didn't look at the defendant, not once. In late April 2017, after months of testimony and argument, the jury began deliberations. They had no body, no confession, no weapon, only the story told by invisible traces and the absence that defined the case. After 3 days, they returned with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of kidnapping. As the words were read aloud, Marlene buried her face in her hands. Some cried quietly, others sat frozen, the weight of 5 years collapsing in an instant. Garcia-Torres showed no reaction. He stood motionless, eyes forward, as if he were merely an observer to his own fate. During sentencing, the prosecution sought the death penalty, arguing that the crime was premeditated and cruel. But after emotional pleas from Sierra's family, who said they preferred life in prison to years of appeals, the jury spared him. He was sentenced instead to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Marlene Lamar. Her voice shook as she spoke. "This isn't closure," she said. "Closure would be bringing Sierra home. But we have justice, and I'll never stop searching." Those words define the aftermath. Even after the conviction, volunteers continued to search rural areas, reservoirs, and hidden terrain across Santa Clara County. Search teams from across California returned year after year, guided by new tips and rumors, hoping to finally bring Sierra home. But nothing was ever found. Time moved on, but for Marlene, the days still revolved around that morning in 2012. Her daughter's room remained largely untouched. Her clothes still folded, her photos still smiling from the walls. Each year, on the anniversary of Sierra's disappearance, the family held a vigil, candles flickering against the dark, her favorite songs playing softly through the night air. The world had changed, but Sierra's absence had not. The case of Sierra LaMar became a haunting symbol in California's criminal history, a reminder that even with science, evidence, and conviction, justice without recovery is still incomplete. The girl who vanished on her way to school had never been found, yet her story refused to disappear. In a field outside Morgan Hill, wind rustles through tall grass, the same fields where volunteers once called her name over and over. Somewhere beneath that quiet sky, her mother still searches, refusing to let the silence have the final word. Because even without a body, Sierra LaMar's presence endures, in memory, in justice, and in the echo of every unanswered question that lingers in the California dusk.